Well, the Montana Television Network really almost came about by accident. I was with an advertising agency in Chicago, and I was their media director, which meant that I was in charge of all their buying, broadcast time and print too. And I don't know, my office was right up on the Chicago River, and I got kind of tired of seeing people dragging bodies out of the river in the gray days. And I really like Montana. I came out here a lot on vacations and really enjoyed it. So I just picked up one day and moved. And I had no job, knew nobody in the state, and picked Billings because I had done a lot of market research, and Billings wasn't the largest city in Montana at the time, but to me it was the most progressive. And I thought, this is the place that's going to grow. So, and in my business, you really had to be in a fair-sized market because an advertising agency wasn't going to make it anyplace else. So I moved out here, and I remember my wife applied for a charge account at the local department store and said that I was unemployed. And I said, for God's sake, don't say that. Say I was self-employed. So anyway, I staggered along for a while, and I made friends with Ed Craney up in Butte, who was a pioneer Montana broadcaster. I did some market research work for him, and I got employed as an advertising agency by the Yellowstone Park Company. And before I could even get my feet wet there, this opportunity opened up at what was then Cook Radio and Television. One of the stockholders wanted to sell out, and he was perfectly willing to sell very little at a time, which was perfect because I could afford very little at a time. So I bought that little bit, and as I say, they made me president because I was the only one in the group that knew anything about broadcasting. And I always say, well, I ran the station so badly that all the rest of the stockholders decided to sell out too. So the station bought their stock in, and I ended up in about 1958 with a big debt and total ownership of the station. And then my friend in Butte decided that he wanted to get out. He was considerably older than I was, and in those days you could pile up money in a corporation and not have to declare it out in dividends, and you could take it out in capital gains tax. So he had a lot of money piled up, so what I did was take his money out of the station and pay him back, which was a pretty good system. And so we had Billings and Butte, and then eventually I added Great Falls, bought that from Dan Snyder, and we built a station in KPAX in Missoula. And then we linked them all together with microwave.
That was fairly forward thinking at the time.
Yeah, I think we were just about the only statewide network like that. And it was quite effective. In fact, our competition in Missoula said that at one point he told the FCC that I had a stranglehold on Montana, and I wish that
was news
true.
to you.
Yeah. It wasn't quite the system that he described, but it came together, and as I say, we had hope that with a statewide newscast, what we did was originate in Great Falls with Bill Whitsitt originally, and then with Ed Coughlin. Both of whom were first-rate anchors, and they would give national and state news, and the state news would be clips and also live cut-ins from the various stations so that we could cover the state pretty well, and then we would cut away to local news and come back for sports. So theoretically it was a good system, but it didn't work very well in Billings because our competition was able to instill the idea that we were not a local newscast, that we were a state newscast. And that we, if it was local news, you had to tune into their station. And they were fairly successful in that. So we didn't do as well here as we did every place else, but by and large, it was very good. I think, let's see, I ran it for the MTN for 30 years, and I think we lost 2 rating books in
Wow.
2 markets in that period of time. And one was because we had just started in Missoula. We were just on the air, and people weren't accustomed to it. And the other was here in Billings. We lost 1 rating book because NBC, which was with our competition, put on a whole bunch of specials that were pretty tough to compete with. But
I think that string is still intact, by the way.
yeah, well, that's important. You know, it's a funny thing. At one time, let's see, ITT or somebody like that took over ABC, and they went to ABC and said, "What's your problem?" He said, "Well, we don't have affiliates in enough markets." So he said, "Buy them." So they went ahead and offered affiliates considerably more money to carry their programming than either CBS or NBC was doing. And I went to New York to talk to them, and I finally said at the end, I said, "No, you people don't have the programming." And I remember the guy I was talking to said, "You're a chicken." I said, "No, I just want to be first." And so we turned it down and went to our competition, and that enabled us to stay ahead of the game pretty well, because ABC had some good programs, but not too many.
When you did news, well, we processed film. I interned at KXLF in 1974. My first thing I learned was how to run the film processor.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you think about that, each station, shot their own film, and if it was a really important story, it was sound on film, but it had to be important, because other than that, it was just audio tape and the silent film.
Yeah. Well, it was funny, you had local live, but one of the main problems we had, and people wouldn't even think about that now, was accessibility to the network. We were sitting in Billings, Montana, and the line went down through Denver and Salt Lake City, and then out to Spokane, but you didn't want to be picking up from Spokane because it was a different time zone. So we found a signal up on the old Medicine Wheel down in the Bighorn Mountains, and it was a signal that was so weak you could barely understand, you could barely see it on the screen. But what we did was, instead of stacking antennas, which people did a lot of vertically, we did it horizontally, so that each antenna would improve the signal slightly. So by the time it got to the end of our stack, why, at least you could see that there was a program going on. And then we microwaved it from the Medicine Wheel directly to the hill, Sacrifice Cliff, and it was rebroadcast there. And it was great, except that, well, we had 2 problems. One, AT&T came to us and said, "You can't do that. We're a common carrier, and you have to buy us." Well, their charge was something like $17,000 a month, and I figured if we bought that, why, we'd be in business for 2 months, and that wouldn't be too good. So the guy said, "Well, we'll carry it before the FCC." I said, "Well, we can't afford your service." He said, "That's your problem." I said, "No, it's your problem, because we're going to tell people when they can't get the World Series
Call AT&T.
that AT&T is the culprit." And he thought that over for a while. He said, "On the second thought, we won't sue you." So we did get the signal, and it was, as I say, it wasn't great, but it was a great improvement over what we had. And the same thing would happen out in the boondocks, because people would have to use these little tiny rebroadcast stations called translators that were only 10 watts. And they wouldn't have much coverage, so they would link them together. And that, of course, was really dangerous, because equipment wasn't as reliable in those days, and you had the possibility, first of all, that Cook TV would go off the air. And if that didn't happen, then the first translator that you had might go off the air, and that would screw up the second translator. So it was not ideal, but nobody thinks anymore. You know, you just pick it up off the satellite, and there you are. Program's right there, so that's fine. But boy, it took us a long time to get there. We couldn't convince the networks. That was the problem.
Huh. So when you watch, you know, speaking of the newscast, we just launched a new statewide newscast at 9 o'clock. Kind of mirrored what you did back in the day. And then what your overall reaction when you watch local news today, not just here at Q2, but elsewhere? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think my overall thoughts are, first of all, it's well done from a technical standpoint. I think the content is a little bit of a problem in that you're simply proving what we found out, that people want to hear about the fender benders and the convenience store that was held up in Billings, and they aren't interested in, you know, maybe rape charges in Missoula or something else. And, you know, that still doesn't click with me. I guess I'm stubborn, but I still think that it's possible to get Montana together with a newscast, but I don't think the content is going to do that I've seen. Now, to be honest, I haven't seen the 9 o'clock news, so.
Well, we do more statewide news on it, more, you know, than Chase the Fire Engine, a lot of the local news that we do. But it's got good reaction so far, and it's got a little more relaxed pace, I guess, from my perspective on the other side of the desk.
Sure.
But people enjoy the news of Montana, and they are interested in it, but I don't know if it's the reason that they're watching or not, but who knows?
Well, I don't know. It's a desperate time because, you know, the newspaper is less and less content. So your news sources are really not too many. And furthermore, they're not only not too many, but they're inaccurate in so many cases. Social media is just absolutely appalling to me. I mean, if you want to be misinformed, that's where to go. Go to Facebook or go to Twitter or something like Twitter. There's my buddy in the White House. But, you know, I just think I tell all my kids, stay off social media. Of course, they don't pay any attention to me. But
that's the worst thing you can say.
That's
They're
right.
going to do exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
So when you look at back to your newscast, I've been told you did not allow political ads in your newscast.
That's right.
Also, you did not allow negative ads. Is that right? Tell us about how that came about.
Well, we had an annual meeting of MTN up in Lewistown, and I got a telephone call, which I didn't particularly want because we had a meeting, and it was an interruption, but it was from Senator Melcher. And he was concerned because it was just the start of attack ads, and Melcher had heard that this outfit in Virginia called the National Conservative Political Action Committee, run by a guy by the name of Terry Dolan, was going to run ads against him. And he wanted to know what I was going to do about it. You know, well, I knew why he was concerned. Melcher had been picked up for drunk driving, and he thought that they were going to emphasize this and make an issue out of it. So I said, well, John, I haven't even seen the commercials, but we'll take a look at them and I'll tell you. So I came back here to Billings, and we sat down and looked at it, and it was nothing. I mean, it was, first of all, Melcher had no competition at the time. They were trying to establish it so that he could get competition. But it simply said that he was out of touch with Montana. Well, that is a nothing as far as I was concerned. So I told the NICPAC, you know, no way were we going to run these. Well, we got sued, and we won the case. But in the process, we turned down $45,000 in advertising, which we could ill afford to lose at the time. And it cost us $30,000 to file through a Washington attorney. I think it was a 2-page statement. It was fairly expensive. So we won the case, and we won it despite I had everybody in Montana call me. I mean, every lawyer had an opinion on whether or not I could turn down those ads. And I said, believe me, I can. And I even got a call from Judge Murray in Butte, who was telling me I ought not to take the ads, you know, and he mumbled on for a while, and finally I said, look, Judge, I respect your knowledge of the law and everything else, but I've been in this television business for X number of years, and I have studied the communications law very carefully, and I'm going to either carry or not carry the ads based on their content and whether they serve the public interest, and that's it, period. That was the end of that conversation. I'm sure the judge didn't think too well of that, but it was a mess. I mean, and yes, we did. We kept political commercials out of the newscast because I didn't want anybody to think that it was an endorsement of any sort. You know, that may be far-fetched, but I really think that's a good policy.
So today you watch the newscast and they're just filled with these ads, and no one ever turns down any advertising, and it's almost a physical assault on every American. It feels like you can't get away from it.
I know it.
My wife was saying your mailbox is full with it, the radio is covered with it, the television. It's almost just an assault on your human being.
Well, you know, I normally listen to public radio only, but the other day something happened to my car radio and it switched over to a local commercial station. I couldn't believe the number of commercials, political commercials they were running, and the dreadful stuff that people were saying about one another, you know, and they were all third-party people, so.
So is it a result of deregulation then? Because now there really is no oversight, really.
No, Citizens United has screwed that up to fairly well. It's a mess and a half. And political, you can get in more trouble in broadcasting on that than anything else, I found. Anything, you know, because it's very emotional, very emotional.
Do you have a solution for us? Do you have any ideas that might work to clean this up a little bit or change just the trajectory of things? We're just so far down in the toilet. I don't know if we can come back out.
Well, I think the problem is, I don't like the Supreme Court's ruling on Citizens United. I don't think corporations are people and all that. But on the other hand, every time you try to clean it up with political advertising limiting in any respect.
Right, any kind of.
You run against the First Amendment, and it's tough. I can see the Supreme Court saying, "Look, we can't go against the First Amendment. You know, that's it." So they come to some ridiculous conclusions as a result, but still in all, it isn't anything you can clean up. You can help by getting rid of Citizens United, and I guess Tester has got a bill in that does that. But
it seems like the whole concept of the public's airwaves, and those of us that still broadcast, we're on the public's airwaves, but the public has lost all control.
That's
They're
right.
really not the public's airwaves.
No, it isn't. It isn't. It's I don't know. It's you get into the government in Washington, but you've always had problems. The FCC has had over the years, has had some good people and some absolutely terrible people. I mean, they put people right in jail from the FCC into jail. So it's pretty hard to say that their choices have always been great. But I can remember, we had a funny situation up in Lewistown. There is an allocation there for a station, and if you had that, you could put in a stronger translator. It was 100 watts, which was great. And we had 3 stations apply for it, ours and our competition here and the Great Falls Station all applied for it. And I went back, I was the only one of the 3 that went back to Washington to witness this thing. And I walked into the hearing examiner's office and he said, well, I suppose that the guy who has the cheapest rates will win this. I said, you don't understand, we don't charge for this. This guy had no idea what a translator was or anything. It was very educational for him, and we won. But good grief, you got pretty desperate talking to those people after a while.
So you sold MTN to George Lilly, and I've been told you've regretted that.
Yes, I think, I'm not talking about George specifically, but
yeah, it was kind of your passion.
yeah, that type of outfit, invested, capital investment or what, I forget what they call it, but they bottom line everything. And, you know, George was perfectly qualified. He'd had good experience. I was a little disappointed in the fact that it didn't do more for the community, but the station really ran all right, but I mean, they never bought a piece of equipment or anything. And sold it, you know, sold the other stations off first and then Q2. And the outfit he was with was really a station trading outfit. They bought a station in Buffalo, held it for a few months, sold it. They put, I was his consultant, so-called, and we had a meeting once, and he said, well, I'm buying a station in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I had gone to Fort Bragg, which was at Fayetteville, and I said, George, you don't want a station in Fayetteville. He said, oh, yes, I do. Well, he tried to package that with Q2 at one time and sell them off as a group, and nobody would buy it. But he actually did. It was an amazing story. The tower in Raleigh for the ABC station blew down, and he became the ABC affiliate for Fayetteville and Raleigh. And while they were getting the tower fixed, that was Clover. But once the tower was fixed, all bets were off. So he had his share of problems. I don't know, George, you know, he was an employee of this outfit, and these were good people for their operation. They were good people. I had a classmate at school, at college, that was a banker in Boston. This outfit was from Boston. TA Associates was the name of it. And I asked him about it, and he said, no, they're first class, so that's all right. The disappointing thing really was we had the station sold to the Disney family. They have a family corporation called Retlaw, which is Walter, spelled backwards. And we had the deal all set up, and everything was going just fine. And they had some bean counter there who decided, I can tweak this thing. Well, he tweaked it around. Needless to say, it was not in our favor. And I thought we had a deal. I had the assurance of the broker, and we'd even had, they'd inspected it. They had a guy named Joe Drilling who was a good broadcaster. He would have been a first-rate custodian at these stations. He came out here and went through all the stations and said, great, it's good. But
so we almost were owned by Disney, huh?
almost owned by Disney.
Darn it. So you saw that the stations have been sold now.
Yeah.
Any thoughts there?
No, I think Cordillera's done a good job. You know, I have no, I think it was a great improvement because they, you know, I think they have the right attitude toward broadcasting. I have met the gentleman in charge of that outfit from the fellow, the Charleston, South Carolina newspaper. He has a ranch down in Wyoming, I think. And
the Manigault, Peter Manigault?
Yeah, and I met him because he was at a party that a friend of mine gave down in Kirby, and seemed like a good guy, you know. So I I've been happy with that. And I've been happy that I'm not in the business anymore. So everything works out for the best in the end, I guess.
Well, I do enjoy your jazz shows on the public radio.
Well,
and I know you've recorded those. Do you still record them? Do you update them, or are they all recordings now? Or?
no, the only one now that we do live or new is the fundraiser.
The fundraiser.
Yeah, we just finished that. And the thing I can't figure out is I thought surely everybody that listens to this kind of music is dead by now because I'm 95 and
I'm just discovering it. So, you know, I mean, I have been, but
that's the funny thing, you know. We, of course, we get all the names coming in, and a lot of them are just like family practically. But we got a lot of new people this time, and every year we raise more money. So there must be people listening. I can't figure it out.
Well, you provide such good background and stories about the pieces and the artists that.
Well, it's been fun. I really enjoy jazz, and I enjoy jazz musicians because they're a different class of people. Believe me, they're different and they're interesting. So it's been a joy.
And it keeps your finger in the world of broadcasting a little bit too.
Oh, sure. What is it? Something like 78 years or something. I've been.
Who's counting?
Yeah.
What do you think, Stan?
You know what, another thing on my mind is what your mix of emotions was like when you first sold the stations back in '83. What was going through your mind when?
84, actually.
Okay.
When I sold the stations, I wasn't quite prepared for it, to be honest. I thought we'd reached a point where there wasn't a great deal more we could do with the state of broadcasting as a whole at the time. And satellites were still in the, you know, a bit in the distance. So I was prepared to sell them, but I didn't think they'd move as quickly as they did. I was only 61 when the sale was completed, and I had figured it'd take 3 or 4 years to get these stations on the market and sold and everything like that. So I wasn't really quite prepared for it. And then the other thing I guess that I miss is the inability to get on the air and give editorials, which I did very rarely, but I would love to get on the air today, believe me. I'd probably be put off the air just as quickly.
If you've got a good editorial, we'll be willing to listen to it. I'm sure Stepanek would jump on that.
No, he wouldn't. No, I'm afraid after I got through talking about my good friend in the White House and a few other things that have been going on that he wouldn't. But it was a mixed emotion because, first of all, the station was sold, as I said, to a group that really didn't spend any money on it and didn't continue on with what few projects we had in development at the time, so that it was disappointing to me that it was going in that direction. And I had an office in the building here at the time, but I finally had to give it up because people from the station were coming up and crying on my shoulder, and this got to be very, very emotional. So I just decided to, look, I better move out of the building so people don't think I'm still connected with it in any way. But it was a hands-off operation. I haven't, this is the second or third time I've been back in the station since they've been sold. And it's changed a lot, and I think changed for the good. You know, it's progressed. And that wasn't happening under the people I sold to. So that was my concern.
Anything else, Dan? Looking at the old test pattern here, does that bring back memories? Looking at.
Oh my Lord, yes. It was really strange, you know. When I bought this, when I had a chance to buy the station, I went around the whole area, you know, to see where it was covering, but you had no coverage surveys or anything like that. We ran the first one with Nielsen, after I bought the station, but I would go around, and when I'd see an antenna, I'd stop in and check with the farmer or whoever had it, and say, what are you watching? What do you like? What don't you like, etc. And I'd find the outer limits of the thing. And I got down out of Buffalo, Wyoming, and there was an antenna, and I thought, God, this guy can't possibly be getting Cook TV, it's the mountains in the way and everything else. And I stopped in to see him, and he said, no, he said, I don't get Billings. He said, but 10 o'clock every morning I get Green Bay, Wisconsin. And it did, you had skip reception. We were big in Tampa, Florida for a while because for some reason or other, your signal goes up and hits the ionosphere and then bounces back down again. And apparently it just bounced right to get us into Tampa because we had several letters. There were always people who, in the early days, would report when they saw a distant station. They had
Right.
kind of a thing like ham radio and that sort of stuff. But it was interesting to see where we were and where we weren't.
The one thing I remember is when color TV came on. It was, bigger than the high def that we have now. But what's your recollection of when Cook TV went color?
Well, we were at a disadvantage there because NBC was the first to go color, and I think Great Falls or somebody bought a color camera before we had color. But once it came, I thought it was a real blessing. I think, I don't know, we still ran black and white, and they aren't that bad, but I hate to admit this, but I'm a Lawrence Welk fan.
Right.
And I watch their shows, and of course they do show some of their old black and white shows. And they aren't bad, but they don't have the zip or anything. So color was a tremendous factor, I thought.
And I remember the story of someone would call here and want to talk to Lawrence Welk. They thought he was performing here in the studio.
Oh, he had worse than that. There was a lady down in Wyoming that thought Lawrence Welk was watching her undress at night. And she was really concerned.
And what did you tell her?
I tried to explain how television works, but I don't think I ever convinced her. She was absolutely assured that Lawrence was peaking. Of all people, I think Lawrence was about as straight and narrow as you could find. It's a funny thing, though, about Welk. People laugh and everything else, but a lot of his people came up here and performed at the State Fair or the Midland Empire Fair
Right.
here in Billings. And they come up to the station, and do spots and things like that. And I want to tell you, I never met anyone off that show that wasn't a first-class person. They were great people. I mean, Welk, of course, was a straight arrow. There's no question about it. But he only hired straight arrows. And, we had Larry Hooper and we had Myron Florin and people like that. And they were...
Did the Lennon sisters ever come?
The Lennon sisters.
I was in love with one of the Lennon sisters, the youngest one, I think.
Yeah. I was at an affiliates meeting in Chicago, and people could dance with the Lennon sisters.
Wow.
And I thought, boy, I'm going to dance with Janet because the people back in Billings, my friends will all die. But I finally lost courage and didn't do it. But yeah, they came very early. They were very small when they first came out here. And they had to come up, they came up to Sacrifice Cliff because this station wasn't here then.
But you built this building.
Yeah, built a building in '59. Well, we had to. We had stiff competition. It was owned by oil people and headed by Phil Fortin, and he was a very good businessman. But he fortunately didn't know anything about broadcasting, because if he had, he would have killed me. But he had a studio downtown, so we had to get a studio downtown because people got tired of hauling their stuff up on Sacrifice Cliff, so we had to do that. And he was a good competitor.
good competition is a good thing. Yeah, it makes
Yeah,
you sharp and
That's right.
keep showing your toes.
No, we probably wouldn't have moved downtown as quickly as we did if it hadn't been for him. I think he and we had it was a peculiar thing. When I came with the station, Fortin had applied for the second station, and it was too small a market for two stations. And people who owned this station at the time recognized that, and they filed with the FCC to keep Fortin out, at least for the time being. And when I took over the station, I pretty much had to decide whether I wanted to continue the suit or not. And I looked at it, and I had, I had good contacts. I had worked with Procter & Gamble and like that in Chicago, and I called them, and they said, no, we aren't going to buy your station. It's too small, So I thought, well, this is not going to be good if you have to divide.
Right.
As I say, we're programming 4 hours a day, and divide that programming up between two stations. That's not good, and furthermore, the audience would not be that good. So it was well worth continuing, and we went down, and I testified, and our manager testified. The hearing examiner was the chief hearing examiner, and we had a prominent broadcast economist as one of our star witnesses. The only thing that hearing examiner allowed into the record was the name and address
Really?
of the economist. He said, oh, that's all speculation. He said, we're not going to look at that. Then he allowed my manager, who was kind of a talking nut, but he described every fish in every stream in the coverage area of Q2. He allowed all that to go on the record. The record was a ton of stuff about that big before you got through. It took him 18 months to come to a decision on it. So I thought, oh my God, how can you run a business like this? But that's the way it was.
Let me ask you one more question. When did you do Start News? Was it because of competition? When did the 4-star final? Was that the first newscast, or?
I forget. Vic may remember. We had. I think we had a newscast at the time, but we had a lot of it was divided up into what I called schlock, which was the 4-star final was an idea I stole from the NBC station in Chicago because they had done a good job with it. They had sports and news and Studs Terkel and stuff like that on. And it seemed to work well for them, so we put it in here too. But some of those segments were sold out as commercials. They call them infomercials today, which are dreadful, incidentally. But
Schlock was a good name.
yeah, that's right. So it took me quite a while to weed out the schlock. And I don't know, by that time, we had decided pretty much on the MTN news format, so it was discarded. But it was pretty terrible. The salespeople were mad as hell at me because the schlock was very productive for them. But my Lord, to get a guy on and talk for 5 minutes about his business is pretty tough going. And they are professionals, One story I didn't tell, it's a favorite of television viewers and Billings, is the one where we had, where the advertiser himself did the commercials, which they still do in some cases, and some of them are, the guy from Hertz is a pro. That guy's good. But this guy was Sterling Thompson of Thompson Dairy. And Sterling was a good guy, but he talked in a monotone. And he sponsored a show which had 3 breaks in it. And this one show, he said, well, I want to show you my famous Thompson Dairy whipping cream. So he's there with an egg beater spinning it around in this bowl for the minute commercial he had. And at the end of the minute, this whipping cream is lying absolutely flat. I mean, it's nothing. So he opens up in the middle of the show, you know, and he's back with his egg beater stirring this cream up. Same result, nothing happening. So the closing commercial, I thought, well, surely he's going to do something else. Oh no, he's back with his egg beater stirring this thing up. You know, say, well, I don't understand this, you know, this is happening to me, you know, and he's off the air, you know, and that, boy, I want to tell you, everybody in the city talked about that commercial. It was famous, and it was funny, but that was it. It was live, you know. We couldn't tape it and
Needed to
redo
practice that at home first before.
Yeah, that's right. But you got a lot of that stuff. It was fun. It was fun. I enjoyed it.
Great story. My folks knew Sterling. Yeah, played golf with him several times.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
He was a character too.
Yeah, he was a character. But
If I just one more question from my end. Talked a little bit about you know how the TV, how the promise of what you were trying to do with MTN didn't pan out. But I'm curious, you know, what do you think television has the potential to do in its highest and best form? What do you think the potential is there?
well, I guess I'd have to resort to my hero Ed Murrow, who said that you know, without public service and without programs like his See It Now and that type of thing, and of course his famous show on Joe McCarthy, that television was just a box of wires. And I think that's really true. I think television has progressed somewhat, but the programming, you know, sitcoms are still there, and some of them are worse. The shows, you know, survival shows and stuff like that are pretty bad. So I guess I'm not as big a fan of television as I once was. I watch sports and news now primarily, and I think, you know, they're well done. Also, some business shows are well done. And I think you've got tough competition here because of that nightly business show, because that's for people who are really interested in the stock market or something like that. That's a well done show. But you know, when you asked me when we were down at the office what I thought of
Right.
some of the shows, I think I delivered a very blunt opinion. It's too bad, but on the other hand, you've got the way it's set up. You've got to draw an audience, and these things draw an audience. But they're having more trouble now because of I mean, you're not down to 2 or 3 stations
it's
anymore.
so splintered and it's
Yeah.
so specialized now, and some of the special programs, as you mentioned, are really awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just want to watch mountain climbing, you can do that as long as you want. But like the real estate shows, the housing and you know, the curb appeal and all those my wife watches them constantly. She'll watch reruns.
Well, I watch a lot of C-SPAN because I think C-SPAN tells you much more about the senators and the congressmen than you can learn from when they come back home and appear on an interview show or do commercials, you know, for their election. You know, I was very favorably impressed by Tester because in the Wells Fargo hearing, when Wells Fargo had all their problems with the fake accounts, there was Elizabeth Warren flying around the ceiling, you know, up in like a moth to flame, and just lecturing the president of Wells Fargo and giving him hell for everything. Tester was asking very sensible questions. What are we going to do in this case? What action are you going to take to correct this problem, you know? And I was very favorably impressed by him because I thought at the time, you know, here he's on the finance committee. I thought, this guy drives a Deere tractor up in Big Sandy. What the hell does he know about finance? Well, I found out that he either knows quite a bit or he's got a heck of a staff, because these questions were first rate.
The same with Mark Zuckerberg in the Facebook hearing. He had very pointed questions. What are you doing to prevent this from happening
Yeah.
again? And you know, what accountability can you assure us? You know, it was very pointed. So maybe the same staff member, I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but very good questions.
Yeah, well, I think that's important. And, you know, when you watch C-SPAN, you learn who the showboats are, you know, and Ted Cruz, the prosecutor, I call him, because he wants to show somebody up, you know. He's not interested necessarily in getting answers on which you can take action, but he just wants to show the guy up that he's a bum. Well, you can make your own opinion as to whether he's a bum or not. You know, you don't need help. But I think C-SPAN is quite informative. Sometimes it's pretty dull, you know. But I like their history too, because I'm a Civil War buff, and they have a lot of very good people on the Civil War. So it's where I watch a lot of television these days. Sorry, fellows.
No, that's fine. I mean, it's interesting.